You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant. And today, Andrew Schydlowsky is on here from TrackStreet. Ironically, we've been playing in the same space for a long time and just got the opportunity to connect with him maybe a month or so ago and was just incredibly intrigued, all the stuff that's going on over there. And then we just had a few great conversations. And I was like, hey, why don't you jump on the podcast and we can help share what's going on across the board. So, Andrew, I'd love to kick it over to you if you want to do a brief intro yourself, a company. We can dig into your background. That's a cool story. And, just have a cool conversation. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. It's fun to be here with you. So absolutely. So yeah, I'm the founder and CEO of TrackStreet. But I've been in e-commerce since really I got a crazy idea back in 1998 that I should make some products I didn't know how to make, sports nutrition products for athletes, and sell them to people on the internet. And so really dark days of e-commerce. So going way back. So I am one of those old school e-commerce guys that has evolved over the years. And yeah, I love playing in this space. Like I think we're so early in what the internet's going to be for brands and commerce and consumers. And I get so excited about helping to shape it. So I love this stuff.
Yeah. So take us back. If you're in 98, that is, I'm still in college at that point in time. Like when you're jumping in and you're looking at that, like would love to kind of walk through what you've seen the biggest changes be outside of like Amazon. And then like, where is your passion driven you? Would love to kind of tackle that stuff. Like, how'd you even think in 98 to do that outside of books, right? I was just starting to buy stuff on Amazon for my, my chemistry books and all.
Yeah. And the funny thing about Amazon is in one of the businesses that I evolved into, when they came into my space, like, actually, like, who are these guys? Like, I'm going to crush them. Like, how dare they? And, it's like, now it's like pounding my fist at the sky. Like, from the Gods Must Be Crazy, that movie, it's like what in the world was I thinking? Really funny. But yeah, I saw the power of what the internet could be. And ironically, even back then, I'm actually living abroad. And I was really ready to come back to the States. And this just seemed to be like the path forward for me. And I just saw that mail order was this great business and it was evolving. And the internet represented this always on store where you had the ability to connect with consumers all the time without actually having to be the one having the conversation if you did it right. And it seemed to me that people hadn't really figured out how to market to people right yet. And like there's this disconnect in that how could the internet not grow? Like there's just so much potential. And yeah, 98, it was certainly early, but websites that really weren't database driven yet. Like if you wanted to sell products on a store, you kind of had to build a product on every page. And like it was really rudimentary, basic stuff. And I remember putting all the pieces together of, I had this offline stuff. I had brochures and cards. And I said I was going to go blanket events and really good guerrilla type marketing to drive people to a phone or ideally to the internet. And so there's a lot of feet on the street approach. And I still love how you leverage community to drive sales on things. But then, I love the internet because it was so cool. Like you could communicate and educate so differently. And I just expected, though, that I would launch this website and the things would just start happening. And it turns out that you can have a great product, great idea, and a lot of postcards on windshields. And does not mean that the phone rings off the hook. And that was really hard learning for the first bit because the internet was not there yet. So it was really hard work.
So was it like fulfillment and everything? You were doing it all. And then how did you kind of transform into like digital marketing and grow? So, where is that business like today?
Yeah. So yes, it was everything. I do mean everything. When I started, like I was messing with powders and containers in my apartment. It was really like learning from the ground up, and that evolved into custom formulations and patent pending on things, but I mixed things, I labeled things, I shrink wrapped them, I boxed them. I didn't have enough money to buy the popcorn dispenser machine, so I built my own out of like plastic and PVC. Like everything that came in, like I had big bags of whey protein. It was nuts. It made no sense, but I had no money, and I just thought I could do this because no one had told me I couldn't, or I didn't believe them, and so it made no sense. And this is also back when pay-per-click advertising was 5 cents a word. Like that was what it cost on GoTo. It was before Yahoo, so it was really early, and so you could kind of do it with nothing if you had no overhead. And I didn't have much overhead. I didn't have much money. I didn't have a very expensive lifestyle as a guy. Eventually, I hired other people, and there was a tremendous amount of learning because I never worked for anybody else. I had this background that didn't make a whole lot of sense for people to hire me. It didn't fit in a box or a circle. It was just very unusual, and so kind of got to forge my own path. So it was wild. So yeah, I was fulfillment, marketing, everything, and even the day before I launched, I said that before. Like I think it was a week before. I actually got served with a lawsuit that I was infringing on someone's trademark, which was crazy. It made no sense, but it shut me down. And so, from the beginning, I had craziness happen. And so, yeah, it was a wild, wild start, but it evolved into many things. And it kind of evolved into my brand, not just being on the internet, but also being in retail. And that was my feet on the street, going to stores and learning what it took to sell in and get some shelf space. And it was developing complex products that were new to market, which was really fun. Even some patent pending stuff. And then one day, I started thinking about it and said, well, it's really hard to get people to buy my stuff if they've never seen it. So of course, I want them to taste it, but maybe I should sell them what they're already buying in stores online and just add my samples and literature in the boxes that go out. And that kind of birthed what was the next generation of what I was doing, which is this much larger entity. And we started selling all this stuff online, e-commerce to consumer, but it was now 40,000 different UPC codes in our warehouses. So 200 to 400 deep. So anything about on or in you. And I do really mean on or in you. So really wide array of product. And then my stuff went into boxes along with other things that were being sampled. And that became a very different operation. Right? But technology is always the backbone of that. And then when I opened a distribution company, we ran trucks up on the coast of California, but I really wanted to verticalize things. And I had some retail as well, but I was always really thinking about how do you leverage technology to tie the pieces together. And we had to build a lot of things that didn't exist in market yet. And which was for me always really interesting. How do you move faster in ways other people couldn't do? And some things that you did with marketing, people could see and they just copy you. But there's some systems we could build that people couldn't replicate. And that became the secret sauce that really exploded the business. And it was a lot of fun. It also taught me that software could be really powerful. I just hadn't imagined I could build software for other people until I saw some other people doing some things. And I realized that this way of running business could be really, really interesting.
Is your background in, like, what is it? Is it like computer science? Is it programming? Is it?
No, I just, I've always been dangerous. And so I'm not technical. I couldn't build something from scratch, although I've built complete e-commerce systems, for example, in Cold Fusion for other companies when I was a chief growth officer for someone and I just reimagined their business. I've always been able to figure it out. And over the years, because I didn't have a lot of money, I had to go build things. I built early Flash animations. I built my first websites. Like I've always gotten in and done stuff. And so the benefit is, like, I have a pretty good sense of smell. Like if it doesn't smell good, I can kind of figure out why. Maybe I can even fix some things. And so I'm technically dangerous, is what I'll say. And I'll bring some ideas to the table that maybe I shouldn't be able to, but because I've done it for so long, I think about things a little bit differently. But I also think about it from the business side. Really, what are we trying to solve for? What are different ways of approaching it? And that becomes, I think, really helpful, particularly when I can work with someone who is technical. So no, I'm not. But somewhat dangerous, maybe less so now because what we're doing is so complex. But I love getting into it. If I could start over again, I would spend more time. I would love to be able to have those skills.
Yeah, I think there's like so much of and even in the startup life, the idea that people just get it right the first time, and not that I think they don't see the inner workings and the 80-hour weeks of trial and error and trial and error and trial and error. And a lot of that I found just with founders, especially in the tech side, but pretty much anywhere, is it's like that ultimate curiosity on the back end of, I want to try, I know this can work and I want to figure out how and why. And it's, yeah, I mean, the trip ups along the way, they stink, but they're all part of that learning. And the more comfortable you can get with the fact that, failure is an event, right? And you can learn something from it. It's too cool. Like the possibilities. What do you see with like AI? And I want to get into TrackStreet a little bit for sure. But how do you see AI now shaping what's going on? Because that's top of mind. And that's where I'm thinking right now. A lot of people are thinking about testing and learning.
So obviously the hype train has left the station.
I know, right? I mean, it's literally every dinner I do. It's every webinar. Somebody's like, well, what about AI? What about AI? Just why I'm asking, like, you've got a successful business. You're sitting back there and you're looking at it, and you can now have this real-time holistic look at, what do you feel about AI and how are brands going to use it? Or should they be relying on their partners to kind of develop it for them?
So like AI can apply to different parts of the business. And I think people are really worried about AI replacing everybody. And I think for some roles that's true. But I think there's the potential for AI to supercharge an organization to make your good people superheroes. But I think for that to happen, you really need to be working with the right technology providers who have thought through what they're doing with the AI. And so I think there's a tremendous responsibility, and I said it for us, like we've rolled some AI into our systems, and we have it in our crawling mechanisms. We have some of how we do our self-healing of data. We've started integrating into our reporting because we have an incredible amount of data. We're a data factory. But who cares? You've got a ton of data. If you can't do something with it or know what's coming next, it doesn't really matter. It's like there's tremendous opportunity to see in the dark. And I think that's the promise of a lot of AI, particularly when you're talking about mounds and mounds and mounds of information. But AI doesn't always tell you the truth. And it doesn't have a tell. It doesn't like wink. It doesn't grimace. It doesn't scratch its head. It'll just make stuff up. And for me, that's terrifying, because if someone's in our platform and we say, this is what this means, and do you want to do these next 5 things to make yourself blank money or have this result? And they go, oh yeah, I would have actually shift my sales strategy on what you just told me this thing means. But actually AI has been lying. Like, oh man, that's terrible. Like that's disastrous. So like my job is to safeguard that. Like I actually have to ask the questions, and I've got to tell the AI, here are the rules. Like don't make it up. If you're not sure, tell me. Like there are a million prompts you got to work in. And then pressure tester, the problem is we actually don't know why AI works, which is crazy. Like we're putting all this trust in it, but we actually don't know why it works or if it's right a lot of the time. So if we test tons of stuff, we come back like, oh, this is totally wrong. Okay, well, we guess we can't do that. We can keep on trying it. And so there's this desire to run really fast and hard, is exciting. And it's, who doesn't want to say they've had these huge increases in output or productivity? And I think we've all probably typed things in ChatGPT and come back with like the best version of ourselves in a note that we could never write ourselves, or like maybe on our best day. It's great for that, is it can work for this other stuff. And I think that's the challenge. Like, where do you use it and how do you test it? And I think we're going to find a blowback of people that ran too hard, too fast, and it'll be disastrous.
No, I totally agree. I would think what I'm seeing right now is not everybody's treating it as cautiously as you are. And so I totally agree on the blowback piece, where all the time, all day, every day, there's a new AI tool that's popping up, and people are, in a lot of cases, haphazardly just plugging them in and, amazed initially at what it's doing. But in real time, it, like anything else, if it's slowly off course at the beginning, it looks okay, but you're ramped out 3 months, and now it's regurgitated that data and refined the regurgitated data 100 times, and it keeps getting a percentage off. And now to unwind that, is difficult because now you've got all this additional data that the next tool that might actually work is ingesting. And it's harder to course correct over and over again. But I mean, are you seeing the same thing? Like, I guess I'm concerned at the end of the day for all this new tech that's coming out, if they're not being as diligent as you are, at the forefront of what's it actually doing? Because a lot of people just want to be acquired, get a 15 multiple on a SaaS-based product and move on.
It's terrifying. The technology business and like especially venture-backed is driven by some mechanics that get kind of crazy, and they're like moving really fast is highly rewarded, and a lot of times you end up slamming into a brick wall at high speed, and that's awful for everybody involved. And there's like this balance is really hard. I think AI terrifies me in some ways because I think it creates this fundamental question for society of like, what do I believe? Like, how do I know if something's real or not? And that's as simple as, is the video true? Is it real? Did it really happen? Or is it a picture? But now video, which is like the last frontier, what do I question and what can I believe? But coming down, it's like really everything we see. Like I trust people to tell me something is true if they're an expert. But if that expert voice is flawed based on what it's built on, like what then? And I think that ripples across not just technology, society. It's product recommendations. It's like, what should I put in my body, on my face? Like, who do I trust for what? Potentially, it's this great Sherpa for life until it drops us, into a lake because we followed the GPS that we didn't look out the window as we were driving. I don't know. It's a really good question. We have to develop the ability to ask the right questions, I think, along the way, or have partners that are doing it for us. It's a good question.
It reminds me of that Joaquin Phoenix movie, Her. I don't know if you've seen that one, not where it's an operating system.
Yeah.
That is, anyways, it's a fantastic movie. And a few years ago, you're like, oh, I can see maybe we'll be there. And then all of a sudden we're there, where it's an AI operating system that's learning real time around you as a personal assistant. And he ends up like nearly falling in love with this AI system. It's very interesting. And I think that we're near there, but to that, the Sherpa, right? Like you're going to totally trust it until, right? It leads us down the wrong path and we haven't even noticed it. A
long time ago, I don't know if I did some reading or there's someone I listened to, and I can't place it anymore, but I just thought it was fascinating in that someone made a great point that science fiction has been a predictor of everything that's come out. And if you look back at all the like seminal books, it's not far off from where we are. But science fiction raised a whole generation of people that grew up with these ideas of what the future might look like. And those people are now creating the future that they grew up reading about or imagining. And so these things, one has reinforced the other. And so like we're about to create this society that is behaving in a lot of ways like Brave New World and 1984, and pick a science fiction book. We're kind of on that direction. It's not surprising. And like this generation that's growing up now will do some version of that as well.
I love me some Isaac Asimov back in the day, the Robot series, and to see that almost play out right now when you're blending the AI technology and robotics. It's cool. It's cool. It's scary cool, I guess is the right way to put it. It's scary cool.
Amazing promise.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I do want to jump into TrackStreet just a little bit, the platform as a whole and what you guys are doing in the space, because it's super interesting. And I don't mind you taking a couple minutes to kind of explain TrackStreet and what you guys do, kind of your vision. And obviously at any point in time, you have questions for me, you can throw them back my way as well. But I would love to kind of dive into TrackStreet a little bit and kind of the mission.
Yeah, absolutely happy to. And I mean, of course, I think what's interesting about where you sit is you have this bird's eye view of what everyone's doing and the brand conversations, the technology conversations. Like your ability to understand the gaps in the market, like where people are stuck and where it's going is actually really incredible. I'm envious of what you get to do on a day-to-day basis because you get to have all the right conversations, only a slice. And I mean, maybe, I don't know, I'd love to hear, like, I'll share what we're doing and what we're working towards. You tell me, like, are we heading in the right direction? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, at its core, I've always had the belief that, I want to work with brands to help them achieve their end goals. Like for me, empowerment is critical. It's empowerment for the people we work with. Let's take these gaps in their lives. Like I kind of feel like a lot of people spend their days in dark rooms with sharp edges, get surprised by things that cause a tremendous amount of pain all day long. What if we can empower people and brands to make decisions based on information that helps them leapfrog their problems? Like how can we actually make their day-to-day existence better? That's critical for me. Like how can we put in places of power and create superheroes in organizations? And for people that work with us, it's the same thing. Like how do we put people in a position where they can do more than they thought they could, they continue to grow, and we empower them to go make decisions that propel people forward in all parts of life. Like that's what our founding principle was, and we continue to roll out with that. The first part of that for me was always, let's show people where their stuff's being sold. Because if you don't know what's happening on the internet with your products, like you can't make decisions on anything. You don't have strategy. And so for us, that's always been a starting point. Like let's understand the ecosystem in a way that you may not know. And then action the information to achieve your business objectives. Like ideally, where we end up is actually pretty simple. And it's a little bit going back to this kind of AI-driven conversation we just had, is, I believe that you should come to us in the morning and log in and our system says, hey, good morning, Aaron. It's good to see you. We haven't seen you for 3 days. While you've been sleeping, these are all the things we've done for you. And based upon your business objectives and the things we know that matter to you, here's how you're performing. And actually, there's some decisions you have to make based on what's happened. Here are the 5. Tell us what to do. Yes, no, A, B, or C, based on the business objectives. And I'm like, great. Thanks for visiting us. We're going to go do that for you. And we'll let you know when to come back. Now, you can always go dig into all the things, like reports, all these things, the things that have happened. But we're going to move your market for you in a way that helps you achieve your goal. And that's generally related to more money in the right pockets with the right people and consumers with the right product at the right time from the right source. Like if we can remove the friction points, if everybody has a better and more delightful experience with your brand, wherever they're touching it, and you've protected the people helping you build your market, then I think we've won. And everything we're doing is trying to get there. Now, obviously, we're not at the point where you could just go to sleep and we just do everything you want. Like that, we're not the cyborg yet. But actually, I don't think we're that far off. And so as we think about what we do with this massive amount of information we have, it's towards that. Right? It's trying to solve a much bigger problem. It's not necessarily about a price point control or an authorized seller somewhere. That's a big part of it. And that's where our foundation has been, where we've grown from. But it's these other pieces of understanding where incredible amount of data from all these different parts of the market are flowing in. You've got all the marketplaces, you've got websites, you've got impacts from online to offline, all these things that are happening with siloed data systems that you really can't put it all together and track it all. It's just impossible. How do you take it all and ensure that based upon what you want to achieve, things are happening for you while you sleep? Like that, I think, in my mind, is the win. So that people can get their job done in a way they couldn't before. And through that, they're empowered and they're better. Like, I mean, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I'm just making a couple notes here to make sure because you're saying, hey, like you'd shoot it out, and then I kind of give my response.
Yeah. You talk to people all day. Like you hear some of the problems, but you also are a little bit of a futurist because you think about where our world is going. Like, what do you see?
Yeah. I mean, just as you're talking, I'm kind of like putting things together. One is, going back to the AI piece. And the biggest issue with AI is disparate data, right? Is there's all these different data streams that are coming in from all over the place. And people used to have a data lake, and then it was a data ocean, and then there's 15 data oceans. And the tough part with AI is not only does each company have 15 data oceans, but every data ocean is different from the other 15 data oceans at another company. And so the AI struggles with what data it's pulling in and how it rationalizes the data. And so people need a single source of truth. And so CDPs a few years back stormed on the scene, and they had the same issue, was all this disparate data. But I think we're getting further along where they started to come back. And I move that to this idea of, if you can have a platform that's consistently pulling in data in the same manner over and over and over again, you can organize that data, you can enable brands to use that pocket of data you have to power other AI, or you develop your own AI and you're going to be better than anybody else because it's organized. And then everybody who jumps onto your platform can utilize it, and you're going to be the most supercharged platform around, because AI, it's a prediction engine, right? The better data that you put in, the cleaner the data you put in, the better and cleaner the prediction that comes out, and you can trust it more and more. And the more and more you can trust it, the more and more people will trust you, and then you generate more data and it snowballs. So that's the first part of what I was saying. The other side of, if you can have what people struggled with the onset of e-commerce, and brands are really trying to finally tackle right now, and they didn't do it a few years ago because Amazon was a rounding error. Oh, whatever, the e-com teams, oh, you're the funny team in the corner, haha. Now Amazon's a huge portion of the business. Marketplaces are a bigger portion of the business. Direct to consumer are a bigger portion of the business. More things are being sold online. And then these brands that were smaller now are bigger online. And so now third parties everywhere overseas are throwing products back in, to your point around, hey, where's my products being sold? Currently, companies they have to go out, and you'll have an Amazon agency or a Walmart agency and a price monitoring agency, an unauthorized reseller agency, monitoring, overall ad spend, ROI, shipping cost. You need a provider for everything. And so the next one is, if you can provide that platform that syncs it all together, right? If you go back 20 years ago, you'd have a Walmart rep. Well, when you're dealing with a Walmart rep, they just need to know everything Walmart. They didn't need to know Kmart, Meijer, Walgreens. They didn't have to. There's no overlap unless people left the store and drove someplace else. Well, now every retailer overlaps with every other retailer. And so there's no single point of truth. But if you can tie that all together on the e-commerce forefront to serve as that single source of truth for what the data is, what's being sold, where, for how much, now I can determine my profit margin. Now I can determine where I'm going to spend my retail media dollars, what my attribution is, and I can start to really track it and stitch together a justification for when Walmart wants more retail media dollars, or Amazon. They all want more, but where should I actually spend based on profitability? Yeah, everybody's going to want it. Everybody's going to want it. As long as it's not $1 million a year, right?
Yeah, like the data silos have to go away. No one can manage 30 platforms that don't speak to each other. It can't exist.
Right.
So I think people have to start playing with each other and creating these partnerships, because in the end, the user has to win. Right? The user wins, the other people win. Right? If they don't get what they need and they're not successful, it doesn't really matter. Right? So if that's the end objective, these people, we all have to work together, and the data has to move around. But I absolutely, I totally agree with that. But I think there are all these practices you've applied to retail in the past, like how you run a retail account and how you understand how it's working, that haven't yet been applied to the online world. And for me, that's what's super interesting and exciting, is that we can take what would work in offline, and then how does it apply to the online world? How do you deal with out of stocks and white space and you used to have reps that walk into stores and look what's on the shelf or face things or pull things out of the stock room and like, hey, you guys ordered this. It's sitting back here. Put it on the shelf. Let me do it for you. What's the equivalent online? There's some really basic things that haven't happened. There's so much of this, right? And we're working on that. But there's so much of that. But also even thinking about, okay, so let's understand what your products are being sold online. But people are buying it offline, putting it offline and using pooled inventory or locating it multiple places. Like understanding geography online and putting it in a way that actually relates to offline is also really interesting. What's your geographic distribution? I know it's a website. You don't really know where they are, but do you? Maybe. Like, how do you put those things together? It's like thinking about localization differently. Inventory is being sourced, where it goes after that. Like, and then where should you put your advertising dollars? It's, what I've learned through people I've spoken to in different parts of the business say that the amount of retail space you have in a locale directly impacts what your online sales are in that geographic area. So it's not just showrooming, it's like brand presence. And that's interesting. I don't know that I would have thought that through in my own unless I've spoken to someone who works in that business. And that was fascinating to me. Like, where is that data right now? Where does that live? Who knows that? If I'm a head of sales and marketing for an organization that has a national footprint, like, have I thought about the importance of that retail distribution, the need to have localization to drive my direct-to-consumer business and my kind of online strategy? I don't know. But I think we all need to be having that conversation.
Yeah. Did I connect you over to like Megan Caroon at ClearData? This is like that real-time conversation where she's...
I haven't.
Oh, it was an earlier episode of the podcast. Everybody, you can go look it up. She's playing in that space today. And I totally agree with you. No, people aren't looking at it. They're just not. And it's not because they're ignoring it. It's because they've had 150 other things to do and only time to do 50 of them. And they're just running as fast as they can. And then as things start to slow down, tech stack rationalization is huge. We just did a dinner last week in New York on like step one of future-proofing your tech stack is like rationalizing what you're using, like trimming out all the garbage that you don't need that you signed up for. On the back end of your direct-to-consumer site, it was a plugin that you couldn't miss out on. And that's like step one. And so we're in this weird phase right now of people doing a hard look of the tech that's out there. This is direct-to-consumer. This is, paid media. This is everything. What's really working is number one, and what's going to be around 2 years from now. Because especially if you're a larger company, right? If you're Fortune 1000, Fortune 5000, whatever it might be, if you're in the retail space, you need to know your partner's going to be here in 2 years because you can't go all in, right, on a startup pre-Series A that's not profitable. Like you can't. I don't see how you can. I mean, you can test and learn. You can have a research budget. I'm totally in favor of that. Like every company should have a technology research budget where if nothing comes out of it, that's fine, but you tested and learned. But if you're going to choose a strategic long-term partner, you better make sure they're going to be there 2 years from now.
Yeah, I think you also, though, have to look at some of the companies that came up in the last number of years that raised a ton of money, had to move so fast because of the valuations ascribed to them, as they raised hundreds of millions of dollars, that skipped steps. And they sold hype, not reality. And those are very dangerous too, because they're at a kind of this existential crisis stage coming, if not already. You don't want to get caught there either. And so, like, I think everybody has to ask the questions, what's being promised, what's real, and is there substance here? And there's probably this middle ground of size of company, I think, where they've proven themselves, have not gotten themselves in trouble yet, and are going to be the ones that are going to emerge over the next 5 years to be the ones that win this. Going back to what we just were speaking about, I think there's one company in particular that I think has a really great insight into what's happening locally with inventory and kind of ties that to online. And this whole world of where to buy is it kind of interesting? Like, where does the consumer find this product? And I think there's some people that do a nice job with that. Like Smart Commerce, I think does a nice job. But the one that actually is very interesting for different reasons is locally. I don't know do you know Mike over locally? Awesome. Well, I'll make sure you guys get connected. So what makes them really unique is that they don't focus on the advertising space. I'm not going to run ads with shared carts and things. They can do that stuff, but they actually have inventory levels at retail for thousands of retailers, and they combine that with availability on their sites. But they can start doing some really interesting data around where product is and where it's going. And this is an example of a data set that very few people have. And so they've got a really interesting business with a different approach. So they're not taking the same approach that MicMac, Smart Commerce, others have done. I mean, they can do some of it, but I've taken a different path, which is really powerful. Ideally, you're looking at the role of AI is that all of this data gets absorbed and it's cleaned, structured, and there is going back to my good morning, Aaron, dream dashboard. Here's what's happened and what we think is about to happen. What do you want to do about that? Is I think the dream state, but it requires people that are having this really interesting slices of the world start collaborating with each other to enable that to happen.
And the crazy thing is, I think we're only a couple years away from that, maybe less, of it being a reality. That's what's crazy. And I think that's the power of AI, machine learning now, which is really happening. I mean, it seems like for a few years now, the AI, machine learning, the platforms that were doing it were really, kicking it overseas, the keyboards being pounded overnight and returning AI answers in the morning. Well, yes and no. We're not necessarily AI. But I think we're at a point now where technology is far enough along and fast enough that we can do some pretty amazing things. Yeah. Any questions for me? I've been picking your brain this pretty much this whole time.
Yeah, I guess my question to you is where's the biggest landmine? As we're all moving forward, commerce is shifting, internet is growing so fast. China kind of shifting e-commerce in a lot of ways. What do you think? Where's the hidden?
I think the hidden landmine, I think you touched, the biggest landmine is what you touched on. It is people all out trusting the AI. My biggest concern, what I feel great about is what you were saying is you, as founder, CEO, one of your jobs with AI is making sure the reins are pulled in and that they're quantifying, qualifying, making sure that it's real, because you don't want XYZ to happen to a brand because it gave the wrong answer. I think that there's a ton of new AI tech that's out there, and there's going to be a ton more because we get to the point where it can write its own code. A lot of people are going to be able to do some pretty cool stuff on the surface. But I think the biggest is brands running with this brand new AI that has no controls really in place, and it sending them down the wrong path. And they don't even know about it until it's too late. And maybe that is in the generative AI space where your copyright, trademark infringements, that can go bad really, really fast, depending on where that AI tool is pulling, right, the data from. Is it pulling from your own subset, your internal brand data, which you're usually pretty safe with? Or is this tool telling you it's doing that, but it's also pulling creative ideas from the web and blending them in? This stuff can happen a lot. Where's the AI pricing tools, right? Where is it pulling? If it's going to reprice, where is it pulling it from? And how is it repricing? And are you taking that 100, that $100 or a $200 item and it's now updated across multiple websites for $10, and you're a mid-sized company that can't take $1 million hit. AI and the procurement side that's leading you down the wrong path and you're overspending and that's what it is, right? Because usually it's not way off, but it will get you further and further off. I think that's the biggest landmine is people putting, as I'm almost rambling here, people putting too much trust in an AI tool because they wanted the easy fix. That's what I think the biggest landmine is out there.
Yeah, there's so much there we just said, but I think I think back a little bit. Some of the it must be auto-generated like banner ad images. Sometimes we all see, and you look closely, like there's no way. Like one is obviously not real, but like this makes no sense at all. Like if anybody looked at this, they would not want this tagline in that image. Like this is terrible, right? But someone somewhere just said, let it rip, create A/B test into these things. So here I actually got a follow-on question for you. What is a brand, how does a new product, like physical product, launch in 5 years? Like, how does it launch in a way that isn't immediately copied everywhere? Like, how do you come up with something new?
Oh, from a brand standpoint, it's so different, isn't it? I mean, I think, so a couple of things. I think we have to start becoming comfortable with the fact that we are going to be dealing with copied product in the shortest time frame imaginable. And that's not that we need to be comfortable with it happening, but we need to become comfortable dealing with it and the tools to deal with that. The reality of the old way of going into a store first, I find that so hard to do unless you're a large conglomerate. If you're launching a new brand, online is the way to go because a lot of these buyers now, their job has gotten a lot easier. As more complicated as it got, it's gotten a lot easier. You just take a look, ratings and reviews. Look at how much it's doing on Amazon, and it's got 4.5 stars. And and we can kind of do the data run. I mean, there's different tools out there like FakeSpot that can tell within relative accuracy whether or not they're fake reviews or not. And take a look at that, and then you can say, okay, yeah, it's worth putting on the shelf. But I think we need to use, there's going to be new tools that are popping up. There's some really cool ones, but when you approach it, you're going to have to use a platform that drives awareness, whether that's a product wind or your own affiliate, your own influencer, micro-influencer. You've developed a product. You're going to have to drive traffic to both your direct consumer and marketplace pages. You're going to have to launch them on both. And outside of certain luxury categories, and then just driving tons and tons of traffic to build up organic search. The next phase is you're going to have to dump some of these new AI search engine optimization tools on it that are constantly looking for the way to one up. And I mean, organic search is going to be where it's at. Nobody wants to pay more. I think that Lauren over at Digital Shelf Institute, they were just talking about, the total customer acquisition costs are up like hundreds of percents in the past few years. And then you're going to have a tool that goes in and either fights off people that are coming in and trying to replicate your product, or you're just going to have to keep putting out new products to stay ahead of the game. That's kind of a answer out of left field, but that's kind of what I see right now. Unless you have something that's patented, it's going to be replicated. And it's not going to be replicated right away. It's when it hits mass, when it hits volume. They're all using the tools to see the fastest growing items, and then they're going to be replicated.
I think it's really just becomes a marketing game. Who's fastest, who's best, and who can scale.
Well, I mean, you see like a lot of these brands from overseas now, it's super interesting. They're willing to spend $100,000 a month on a single ASIN in paid media to get it to the top of search. And then they'll back it off. And then they'll just let it ride. And they know they won't get their payback for a year, but they will get their payback. And it's an interesting way that most US brands aren't comfortable with. Like you can't go to a new US brand and say, hey, spend $1.2 million on a product that's going to move 50,000 over the next 12 months, knowing at the following 12 months, you're going to make 1.8 million.
Yeah.
That doesn't compute with a lot of US brands, but overseas, they're doing this quite a bit. We didn't even get into Temu or Shein, right? We didn't even get into them and subsidized, shipments. And that's maybe another whole podcast.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
It's like incredible to watch.
But Andrew, it's been so much fun. We're right here kind of at the end of time, but we'll be sure to put you on a follow-up episode for sure. I want to pick your brain again. But again, thanks for your time today. Thanks for support of the network. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks everybody for listening in. Thanks again, Andrew.
Thanks, Aaron.